Picture this: October 1st, 2013, San Francisco, California, a public library in the Glen Park neighborhood. It's a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Students study, people read newspapers. The atmosphere is calm, ordinary. At a corner table, a young man sits with his laptop. He's 29 years old, clean cut, looks like a typical tech worker. Brown hair, boyish face. He's wearing a t-shirt and jeans. He's typing intently, focused on his screen. His name is Ross Ulbricht. To the people around him, he looks harmless, just another guy working on his computer in a library. But on that laptop, Ross is running something extraordinary, something illegal, something that will change the internet forever. He's operating the Silk Road, the world's first major dark web marketplace, a website where people can buy anything illegal: drugs, fake IDs, hacked accounts, stolen credit cards, weapons. Anything you can't buy legally you can buy on Silk Road. And Ross, using the alias Dread Pirate Roberts, is the mastermind behind it all. He's built a billion-dollar empire. He's facilitated the sale of tons of drugs. He's made millions of dollars. And for 2.5 years, he's been completely anonymous, untouchable. The FBI, DEA, and Homeland Security have been hunting him, but they can't find him. Until today. Because at this moment, FBI agents are closing in. They're in the library, dressed as students, as library staff, as ordinary people. They're surrounding Ross, watching him work, waiting for the perfect moment. Ross has no idea. He's completely focused on his laptop, managing the Silk Road, communicating with users, moderating disputes, counting his money. Then it happens. Two people behind Ross stage a loud argument, a distraction. Ross turns his head to look. In that split second, an FBI agent lunges forward, grabs the laptop and pulls it away from Ross before he can close it or shut it down. Other agents rush in. They grab Ross. Handcuffs snap onto his wrists. He's surrounded, pinned to the table. His laptop, still open, still logged in as Dread Pirate Roberts, is in FBI hands. Ross Ulbricht, the man behind the Silk Road, the internet's most wanted criminal, is caught. After 2.5 years of anonymity, it's over, in a public library, in seconds. The FBI has been hunting him for years, and now they have him, and they have his laptop, with everything on it. Evidence, transactions, messages, his entire criminal empire, captured in one moment. This is the story of the Silk Road, the dark web marketplace that revolutionized online crime, the young man who built it, the empire that generated over $1 billion in illegal transactions, the FBI investigation that took years to crack, and the capture that ended it all. Let me take you through how a 20-something libertarian idealist created the Amazon of drugs, how the dark web works, the crimes that happened on Silk Road, and the moment Ross Ulbricht's anonymous empire came crashing down. To understand the Silk Road, you need to understand the dark web. Most people use the regular internet: Google, Facebook, Amazon, YouTube. This is called the surface web. It's indexed, searchable, visible. But beneath the surface web exists another layer, the deep web. This includes anything not indexed by search engines, private databases, password-protected sites, your email inbox. It's not illegal, it's just not publicly searchable. And beneath the deep web is the dark web. This is a hidden part of the internet that requires special software to access. The most common software is Tor, the onion router. Tor was originally developed by the US military to allow anonymous communication. It works by routing your internet connection through multiple servers around the world, encrypting it at each step, making it nearly impossible to trace. When you use Tor, your IP address, your computer's unique identifier is hidden. You're anonymous. Websites on the dark web have .onion addresses instead of .com or .org. They can't be found through Google. You have to know the exact address. The dark web isn't inherently illegal. Journalists use it to communicate with sources. Activists in repressive countries use it to avoid government surveillance. Whistleblowers use it to leak information safely. But it's also a haven for illegal activity, because if you're anonymous you can do anything without getting caught, or so people think. Ross Ulbricht was born March 27, 1984, in Austin, Texas. He grew up in a middle-class family. His parents were loving, supportive. He was a good kid, smart, curious. He did well in school. He was a Boy Scout. He earned his Eagle Scout rank, the highest achievement in scouting. Ross went to the University of Texas at Dallas, where he studied physics. He graduated with honors. Then he pursued a master's degree in materials science and engineering at Penn State. He was on track for a PhD, a career in science, a normal, successful life. But Ross became disillusioned with academia. He felt the research was pointless. He wanted to do something meaningful, something that mattered. He became interested in libertarian philosophy, the belief that individuals should have maximum freedom and governments should have minimal control. He read books by Austrian economists like Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard. He believed in free markets, personal liberty, and minimal government interference. Ross began to see government regulation, especially drug prohibition, as immoral. He believed people should have the right to do what they want with their own bodies. If someone wants to use drugs, that's their choice. The government shouldn't stop them. He started thinking, what if there was a place where people could buy and sell anything freely, without government interference? A truly free market, anonymous, unregulated, a place where libertarian ideals could be realized. And the dark web was the perfect place to build it. In early 2011, Ross began working on a project he called Silk Road. The name came from the ancient trade route that connected the East and West, facilitating commerce across civilizations. Ross envisioned his Silk Road as a digital trade route, connecting buyers and sellers across the world, anonymously and freely. He taught himself web development. He learned how to build websites on the dark web. He studied encryption, Bitcoin, and anonymity techniques. He worked alone, from his apartment, spending months coding and designing. By January 2011, the Silk Road website was live. It was simple, clean. It looked like eBay or Amazon, but for illegal goods. Sellers could list products, buyers could browse, read reviews, and make purchases. But there was one major innovation: Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, digital money that exists only online. It's decentralized, meaning no government or bank controls it. Transactions are recorded on a public ledger called the blockchain, but the identities of users are pseudonymous. You can send and receive Bitcoin without revealing who you are. Ross realized Bitcoin was perfect for anonymous transactions. Buyers could purchase drugs with Bitcoin. Sellers could receive Bitcoin. No banks, no credit cards, no paper trail linking real identities. But there was still a problem: trust. How do you make sure the buyer sends money and the seller actually ships the product? On the regular internet, companies like PayPal or eBay provide buyer and seller protection. But on the dark web, there's no such system. Scams are rampant. Ross solved this with an escrow system. When a buyer purchases something on Silk Road, the Bitcoin payment goes into escrow, held by the website. Once the buyer receives the product and confirms it's legitimate, the Bitcoin is released to the seller. If the product never arrives or is fake, the buyer can dispute it, and Silk Road moderators would resolve the issue. This system built trust. Buyers knew they wouldn't get scammed. Sellers knew they'd get paid if they delivered. And Silk Road took a commission on every transaction, typically 10 to 15%. It was genius. Ross had created a fully functioning, anonymous illegal marketplace, and he gave himself an alias, Dread Pirate Roberts, or DPR for short. The name came from the movie The Princess Bride, where the Dread Pirate Roberts is a legendary pirate whose identity is passed down from person to person. Ross liked the idea of being a mysterious, untouchable figure. The Silk Road launched with just a handful of sellers, mostly marijuana, a few psychedelics, small scale, underground. Ross promoted it on libertarian forums and Bitcoin communities. Slowly word spread. And then in June 2011, everything changed. Gawker, a popular online publication, published an article titled "The Underground Website Where You Can Buy Any Drug Imaginable." The article described Silk Road in detail, how it worked, what you could buy, how to access it. The article went viral. Millions of people read it, and suddenly, everyone knew about Silk Road. Traffic exploded. Thousands of new users flooded the site. New sellers joined. The product listings expanded. Marijuana, cocaine, heroin, MDMA, LSD, prescription pills, anything you could imagine. Within months, Silk Road became the Amazon of drugs. Tens of thousands of users, hundreds of sellers, millions of dollars in transactions every month. And Ross Ulbricht, operating under the alias Dread Pirate Roberts, was at the center of it all. Anonymous, wealthy, powerful, living his libertarian dream. But he was also now a target. The FBI, DEA, and Homeland Security all took notice. A website selling drugs openly, operating in plain sight on the dark web. They had to shut it down, and they had to catch the man behind it. The hunt for Dread Pirate Roberts had begun. From 2011 to 2013, Silk Road grew into a massive empire. At its peak, the site had over 100,000 active users, over 14,000 product listings, and over 9 million bitcoins transacted, worth over $1 billion. The most common products were drugs. Marijuana was the most popular, followed by MDMA, cocaine, LSD, heroin, and prescription pills like Xanax and Adderall. But Silk Road also sold fake IDs, hacked Netflix and Spotify accounts, stolen credit card numbers, and even guides on hacking and fraud. There were strict rules: no child pornography, no stolen credit cards that could directly harm individuals, no hitman services, no weapons that could cause mass harm. Ross positioned himself as a moral libertarian. He believed consenting adults should be free to buy and sell drugs, but he drew the line at violence and exploitation. Sellers on Silk Road operated like businesses. They had usernames, ratings, customer reviews. If a seller provided good products and reliable shipping, they got positive reviews and more customers. If they scammed people, they got bad reviews and were banned. Some sellers made millions. One seller known as Node sold over $1 million worth of heroin. Another seller known as Super Trips specialized in high-quality LSD and made hundreds of thousands. And Ross took a cut of every transaction. Silk Road's commission was 10 to 15%. With millions of dollars in transactions happening every month, Ross was making a fortune. Estimates suggest he personally made around $20 to $30 million from Silk Road. But running Silk Road wasn't just about money. Ross believed he was creating something revolutionary, a free market, a place where government couldn't interfere. He saw himself as a freedom fighter, a pioneer, a revolutionary. He wrote manifestos on the Silk Road forums, explaining his philosophy. He talked about liberty, free markets, and individual choice. He had a cult following. Users worshipped Dread Pirate Roberts. He was their hero, their protector, the man who made the impossible possible. But behind the scenes, Ross was struggling. Running Silk Road was exhausting. He was paranoid, constantly worried about being caught. He worked 16-hour days, managing disputes, dealing with technical issues, updating the site, communicating with users. He moved constantly, living in cheap apartments and shared houses, never staying in one place too long. He used multiple laptops. He encrypted everything. He used Tor and VPNs to hide his location. He was careful, obsessive, paranoid. But he was also making mistakes. While Ross was building his empire, law enforcement was closing in. The FBI, DEA, Homeland Security, IRS, and international agencies were all investigating Silk Road. They knew the site existed. They knew it was facilitating massive amounts of illegal drug sales. But they had one problem. They didn't know who Dread Pirate Roberts was. The dark web is designed to be anonymous. Tracking someone on Tor is nearly impossible. Ross used every trick in the book to hide his identity. He never used his real name. He never logged in from his home IP address. He always used Tor. He encrypted his communications. But investigators started looking for clues. They monitored Silk Road. They made undercover purchases. They posed as sellers. They infiltrated the site, gathering evidence. And then they got their first break. In early 2013, an IRS investigator named Gary Alford was analyzing Bitcoin transactions on the blockchain. Bitcoin is pseudonymous, not anonymous. Every transaction is recorded publicly, but identities are hidden behind wallet addresses. Alford traced large amounts of Bitcoin moving through the blockchain, trying to identify patterns. He discovered a massive Bitcoin wallet that seemed to be connected to Silk Road. The wallet contained tens of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. Around the same time, another investigator, DEA agent Carl Force, went undercover on Silk Road. He created a fake account and started communicating with Dread Pirate Roberts, pretending to be a drug dealer and eventually gaining DPR's trust. But the biggest break came from an FBI agent named Christopher Tarbell. Tarbell was a cybercrime specialist. He focused on finding technical vulnerabilities in Silk Road's infrastructure. Silk Road was hosted on servers somewhere in the world, but their location was hidden by Tor. Tarbell and his team worked for months trying to locate the servers, and eventually they found them in Iceland. With help from Icelandic authorities, the FBI seized the Silk Road servers. They copied everything: user data, transaction records, messages, and most importantly logs showing the IP address that had accessed the Silk Road servers as an administrator. That IP address belonged to a cafe in San Francisco. Someone had logged into Silk Road as an administrator from that cafe, and whoever that person was, they were likely Dread Pirate Roberts. But there was another clue. Investigators found old forum posts from early 2011, around the time Silk Road launched, where someone was promoting a new dark web marketplace. The posts were made under the username Altoid, and in one post, Altoid left an email address to contact for more information: rossolbricht@gmail.com. Ross Ulbricht, a real name, connected to Silk Road. The FBI started investigating Ross. They found his LinkedIn profile, his Facebook, his entire online presence. They learned he was a 29-year-old man living in San Francisco, libertarian, into Bitcoin, fit the profile perfectly. They began surveillance. They tracked his movements. They monitored his internet activity, and they waited for the perfect moment to strike. On October 1st, 2013, the FBI was ready. They'd been watching Ross for weeks. They knew he frequented a public library in the Glen Park neighborhood. They knew he brought his laptop. They knew he logged into Silk Road there. The plan was simple but critical. Catch Ross while he was logged in as Dread Pirate Roberts. If they arrested him while his laptop was locked or shut down, the encryption would protect everything. They'd have no evidence. But if they could grab the laptop while it was open and logged in, they'd have everything. The FBI set up in the library. Agents posed as students and staff. They waited for Ross to arrive. Around 2 p.m. Ross walked in, sat down at a corner table, opened his laptop and logged into Silk Road as Dread Pirate Roberts. The FBI watched. Waited. Ross was deep into his work, managing the site, responding to messages. Then 2 undercover agents behind Ross staged a loud fake argument, a distraction. Ross turned to look. In that split second, another agent lunged forward, grabbed the laptop and pulled it away before Ross could react. Other agents swarmed. Ross was grabbed, handcuffed, pulled to the ground. It was over in seconds. His laptop was secured, still open, still logged in. The FBI had him. Ross Ulbricht, Dread Pirate Roberts, captured. When the FBI examined Ross's laptop, they found everything. His entire operation, messages, transaction records, Bitcoin wallets, administrative logs, evidence of every crime committed on Silk Road. They also found Ross's personal journal, a detailed diary he'd kept documenting the creation and growth of Silk Road. He wrote about his motivations, his fears, his profits. He recorded how much money he made. He confessed to everything. It was a prosecutor's dream. The FBI also discovered something darker, messages where Ross had allegedly hired hitmen to kill people who threatened Silk Road. According to the FBI, Ross had paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in Bitcoin to have at least 5 people murdered, people who were blackmailing him or threatening to expose the site. However, investigators later determined that these hits were likely scams. There's no evidence anyone was actually killed. The hitmen were probably scammers who took Ross's money and never did anything. But the fact that Ross tried to order murders was used against him in court. Ross Ulbricht was charged with multiple crimes: narcotics trafficking, computer hacking, money laundering, and continuing criminal enterprise, a charge usually reserved for drug kingpins. If convicted, he faced life in prison. His trial began in January 2015 in New York. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: the laptop, the journal, the Bitcoin transactions, testimony from undercover agents, testimony from Silk Road users and sellers. Ross's defense argued he wasn't Dread Pirate Roberts. They claimed he created Silk Road, but handed it off to someone else early on. They argued the FBI had the wrong man. But the evidence was too strong. The journal alone was devastating. Ross had written everything down: his motivations, his profits, his identity as DPR. On February 4, 2015, after just 3.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Ross Ulbricht guilty on all counts. On May 29, 2015, Ross was sentenced. The judge showed no mercy. She sentenced him to double life imprisonment, plus 40 years without the possibility of parole. Essentially, Ross Ulbricht would die in prison. Ross was 29 years old when he was arrested, 31 when he was sentenced. He'll spend the rest of his life behind bars. Ross Ulbricht is currently serving his sentence in a maximum security federal prison. He's now in his early 40s. He'll never get out. Unless he receives a presidential pardon or his sentence is commuted, he'll die in prison. His case sparked massive debate. Supporters argue his sentence is too harsh. He didn't directly sell drugs. He didn't kill anyone. He built a website. Yes, illegal activity happened on that website, but is he responsible for every crime committed by every user? Some compare him to the creators of YouTube or Facebook. If someone uses YouTube to upload illegal content, is YouTube's founder responsible? If someone uses Facebook to organize a crime, is Mark Zuckerberg guilty? Ross's supporters see him as a political prisoner, a libertarian idealist who challenged government authority and was punished for it. They argue he was exercising free speech and facilitating voluntary transactions between consenting adults. There's a Free Ross movement, petitions, websites, advocacy groups. His mother, Lynn Ulbricht, has spent years campaigning for his release, arguing the sentence is cruel and unjust. But prosecutors and victims see it differently. They argue Ross enabled massive amounts of drug trafficking. People died from overdoses on drugs bought through Silk Road. Families were destroyed by addiction fueled by easy access to narcotics. And Ross profited millions of dollars from others' suffering. The judge who sentenced Ross said he was responsible for the consequences of his actions. He knew drugs would be sold. He knew people could die. But he did it anyway for profit and ideology. The Silk Road case also raised questions about encryption, privacy, and government surveillance. How much freedom should people have online? Should anonymity be protected? Or should governments have the power to monitor and shut down illegal activity, even if it means compromising privacy? The case set legal precedents for how online crime is prosecuted. It showed that anonymity isn't absolute. Even on the dark web with Tor and encryption, you can be caught, mistakes will be made, clues will be left, and law enforcement will find you. After Ross's arrest, the FBI seized Silk Road's servers and shut down the site. But within weeks, Silk Road 2.0 launched, a copycat site run by someone else. It was shut down a year later, and that administrator was also arrested. Then came Silk Road 3.0. Then other dark web marketplaces: Alpha Bay, Hansa, Dream Market, Wall Street Market. Every time one gets shut down, another pops up. The dark web marketplace model that Ross pioneered still exists. Today there are dozens of sites selling drugs, weapons, hacked data, and more. The game of cat and mouse between law enforcement and dark web criminals continues. But Ross Ulbricht remains the most famous, the original, the man who proved it could be done, and the man who paid the ultimate price. Ross spends his days in prison. He's allowed limited contact with family. He writes letters. He's become a symbol either of government overreach or of justice served, depending on who you ask. In 2020, then-President Donald Trump was considering pardoning Ross. His supporters lobbied hard, but the pardon never came. Joe Biden, who became president in 2021, has shown no interest in commuting Ross's sentence. So Ross remains in prison, a young man who built an empire, who made millions, who believed he was fighting for freedom, and who will spend the rest of his life behind bars for it. January 2011, a young man with a laptop and a dream starts building a website in his apartment. He believes in freedom, in free markets, in a world without government interference. By 2013, that website has become a billion-dollar empire. Over 100,000 users, millions in drug sales. Ross Ulbricht is wealthy, powerful, and anonymous. Dread Pirate Roberts is a legend. October 1, 2013, a public library in San Francisco. FBI agents swarm. Ross is caught. His laptop is seized. His empire crumbles in seconds. February 2015, guilty on all counts. May 2015, sentenced to life in prison without parole. 2025. Ross Ulbricht, now in his early 40s, sits in a federal prison cell. He'll never leave. His revolutionary dream ended. His freedom gone. His life over. The Silk Road, the dark web's greatest marketplace, built by a 20-something libertarian who thought he could change the world, shut down by the FBI in a public library, and the man behind it, sentenced to die in prison. One laptop, one website, $1 billion, one life sentence. The rise and fall of Ross Ulbricht in the Silk Road, the digital drug empire that changed the internet forever, and the young man who built it and lost everything.